How the Dutch East India Company made $8.28 trillion, more than Apple and Microsoft combined. Imagine founding the world's first megacorp, turning tiny trees into trillions, more than Apple, Microsoft, and your crypto portfolio combined, then torching it all because your execs couldn't handle anyone else getting a sniff of the profits. That's the Dutch East India Company, the VOC. Spice cartel turned colonial death machine turned epic corporate faceplant. They genocided entire islands over nutmeg like it was a personal diss track, paid 40% dividends while waging endless wars, then let corruption and ego turn their empire into a bankrupt meme. And here's the kicker. They had a 200-year head start on everyone, 2 centuries to build sustainable wealth. Instead, chose violence, artificial scarcity, and the corporate equivalent of a toddler screaming mine at a playground. This is the story of when greed met nutmeg and decided, yeah boy, let's make history's most expensive temper tantrum. If you love watching legends self-destruct because they took business personally, stick around. This one's brutal, absurd, and hilariously stupid. We're talking about a company so petty they'd rather commit genocide over negotiating prices. That's not strategy, that's a personality disorder with shareholders. My name is Knox, and I spend way too much time thinking about how the Dutch East India Company became the richest company ever, then yeeted it all because of raging egos and terrible decisions. If you're someone who geeks out over empires getting filthy rich then blowing it on pettiness, hit subscribe and thumbs up if you're ready for the roast. Here's the thing. 1600s Europe is spice-obsessed. Nutmeg from the Banda Islands isn't just seasoning, it's luxury status. One sack could buy a mansion in Amsterdam. We're talking markup percentages that would make modern pharma CEOs blush. A pound of nutmeg in the Banda Islands, maybe a few pennies. Same pound in Europe, 60,000% markup. No, seriously, 60,000%. Portugal and Spain controlled the routes, jacked prices sky high, and Europeans were genuinely convinced spices could cure the plague. Spoiler, they couldn't, but try telling that to a merchant who just mortgaged his house for pepper. Dutch merchants looked at this racket and said, we're not paying that premium for flavor, fam. So 1602, boom, VOC launches. World's first public company with shares traded on an exchange, permanent capital, limited liability, charter to act like a sovereign nation. Trade, forts, armies, treaties, wars. The Dutch government literally gave them a monopoly charter and said, go make us rich and don't ask permission. Basically proto-Amazon with muskets and zero labor laws. They sailed to Banda, signed deals with local chiefs. Bandanese are chill. They've been trading for centuries with everyone. They're like, great, we'll sell to the highest bidder. English, Portuguese, you, whoever pays best. VOC directors back in Amsterdam lose their absolute minds. Competition? That's an insult to Dutch efficiency. They start building forts, pressuring exclusive contracts, sending threatening letters. 1609, skirmish breaks out, kills a Dutch rep. VOC board meets in Amsterdam. You can practically hear them. They killed Jenkins. This is war. Like starting World War I over one guy, except this time it's over tree seeds. Cue full rage mode. Look, this wasn't about discovery or adventure. It was profit margins. They took every lost deal personally, like modern CEOs ratioing competitors on Twitter, except with cannons. Nothing hurts a monopoly's feelings more than free market vibes. The VOC wasn't just building a business. They were building spite infrastructure. Here's where it gets really, really stupid and dark as hell. Nutmeg grows only on these 10 volcanic Banda Islands, tiny specks in what's now Indonesia. Population around 15,000, peaceful farmers trading openly with whoever showed up. They had no concept of monopolies or exclusive contracts. To them, trade was trade. VOC does the math. If locals sell to rivals, prices drop. Monopoly requires zero leaks, zero competition, zero negotiation. Enter Jan Pieterszoon Coen, 1621 Governor General. This guy. He's got a massive insecurity complex about Dutch greatness and views every business setback as a personal attack on his legacy. He writes obsessive letters back to Amsterdam. We must crush them or be laughed at by history. Every English ship that pulls into port, personal betrayal. Every chief who trades with Portugal, existential insult. Coen wasn't just ruthless, he was weirdly emotional about nutmeg, like if Elon Musk took Twitter criticism but had access to a private army. 1621, Coen sails in with 19 ships, 2,000 Dutch troops, plus Japanese mercenaries he hired specifically because they had a reputation for brutality. The Bandanese resist with spears and traditional weapons. Coen has a full toddler-level meltdown. He blockades the islands, starvation tactics, razes entire villages to the ground, tortures local chiefs into fake confessions admitting they betrayed the Dutch, publicly beheads 40 community leaders in front of their families as a lesson, massacres thousands in coordinated raids. Population crashes from 15,000 to under 1,000, most killed outright, enslaved and shipped to Java or fled to neighboring islands as refugees. Then, and this is the cringe part, they repopulate the islands with slaves from other Dutch colonies, plant nutmeg under armed guard towers, and institute a death penalty for anyone caught selling nutmeg without VOC approval. Guys, look at me. I'm Coen, nutmeg god. Yeah, boy. While inventing corporate genocide for stock prices. But wait, there's more darkness. They deliberately destroyed nutmeg groves on surrounding islands they didn't even control, just to keep global supply low. Artificial scarcity on steroids. Imagine if Tesla sent drones to burn down every Rivian factory just to hype their stock. That's the energy. And the payoff? VOC stock absolutely moons. Dividends spike to 40% plus during boom years, shareholders living like crypto kings during a bull run. But here's the problem. Ego inflates way harder than profits. Amsterdam directors become obsessed with flexing. They build massive headquarters. We're talking marble floors, gold trim, commissioned paintings of themselves as conquering heroes. They bribe government officials to maintain their monopoly charter. Insane executive perks. One director literally had a private zoo shipped from Asia. A zoo for clout. And they take business rivals so personally. English traders, tea-sipping wimps. French competitors, wine snob losers. They wage proxy wars across Asia just to spite competitors, draining cash for ego. They also hoard spices, burning excess supply to keep prices high. One year, warehouses overflow with clothes, so instead of selling at lower margins, they torch the surplus. Literal bonfires of profit to maintain artificial scarcity. Proto-hyperinflation invented by accident. Oh, and in 1698, dividend payments come in cloves instead of cash because liquid reserves ran low. Shareholders open their letters like, "Bro, I wanted money, not seasoning. What am I supposed to do, sprinkle this on my debts?" Imagine if Apple paid dividends and iPhones nobody asked for. Hilarious flex until the vibe shifts and everyone realizes you're broke. Now you'd think monopoly equals easy street, right? Infinite money glitch? Nope. Corruption everywhere. Employees in Asia, thousands of them scattered across dozens of trading posts, get lazy. They start skimming profits via private trade on the side, basically competing with their own employer. Nepotism runs rampant. Governors appointing useless relatives to high-paying positions. Embezzlement becomes standard operating procedure. One auditor in the 1770s estimates 50% of VOC wealth in Asia is being stolen internally. Directors back in Amsterdam? Ignore it. Too busy throwing parties and commissioning self-portraits. Overhead explodes, maintaining forts, private armies, endless bribes to local rulers, wars against rivals. It all costs a fortune, and every conflict becomes personal vendetta fuel. The English snag a trade deal in India, VOC declares war. The French establish a port in Southeast Asia, more war. Then the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War hits, 1780 to 1784, naval disaster. British wreck Dutch trade routes, VOC loses dozens of ships, trade access collapses, debt-to-equity ratio hits absolutely insane levels. We're talking worse than Lehman Brothers before 2008. By 1790s, the company is bleeding cash, paying interest on interest, while employees continue embezzling and directors continue denying reality. 1799, total bankruptcy. No dividends paid after 1782, 17 years of shareholders getting nothing. Dutch government finally steps in, dissolves the company, takes over the colonies directly. The richest company in human history dies completely broke because they prioritized ego, vengeance, and vibes over actual sustainable business. Classic L. Trillions in potential, buried under pettiness, theft, and refusal to adapt. They literally had a 200-year monopoly and still managed to fumble it. That takes effort. But here's a wild thought. What if they just chilled? No genocide over nutmeg, sustainable monopoly with fair contracts, no endless ego wars draining the treasury. actual oversight and accountability on corruption? Reformed as markets evolved instead of clinging to 1600s tactics in the 1700s. Would the Dutch still be global trade bosses today? Would Amsterdam be the financial capital of the world instead of London or New York? Or, honestly, would British and French imperial egos just steamroll them anyway? Colonialism was the vibe back then. Someone was going to be terrible. Or maybe, and this is the darkest take, greed always finds a way to self-destruct. Fine, no mass murder, but let's still burn product for artificial scarcity and pay ourselves in clothes. Maybe the lesson isn't be less evil. Maybe it's unchecked capitalism with zero accountability always eats itself eventually. Drop your takes in the comments. Sane VOC world where there's still running global trade? Or was collapse inevitable the moment they chose violence over negotiation? If this made you cackle at how ego and pettiness wreck even the richest empires, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And remember, don't take your nutmeg personally. Peace.